watching the CineFiles.
1 week away from Halloween.
And that's why the night's discussion is going to be entitled Our Favorite Horror Films, because we're going to tie this in with Halloween, so what better way to discuss Halloween but with our favorite horror films. Anyway, let me introduce my esteemed co-host here. To my left, Mr. Eric Cohen. To his left, Jeff Galashaw. And to his left, Michael Folk. Our favorite horror films.
One of the films, scary films, and one of my favorite horror films of all time is actually Rosemary's Baby.
Awesome.
Which one is that?
Rosemary's Baby by Roman Polanski.
Very good.
Awesome film.
And a faithful adaptation of the original novel from too.
And one of the reasons I like it is that he doesn't show you everything and lets you use your imagination, which I feel, unfortunately, a lot of filmmakers cop to. But they don't use it as brilliantly as he did it, because the reason they're doing it is to get a PG-13 rating, or so they can later release it unrated, or they couldn't get the budget they wanted to show the horrific scenes they wanted to. Whereas Roman Polanski made an artistic choice to do that beforehand. And I mean, the film's just wonderful. It has like Tony Curtis in a voice-only cameo, has a young Charles Grodin in an actual dramatic role. And it's just John Cassavetes actually
Mia
working.
Farrow, probably the best role of her life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
And she also had a hit
Frank
single.
Sinatra didn't want her to do.
Yeah.
And don't forget, she had a hit single too on the soundtrack.
And nude in the movie as well.
Yeah, well, that's a plus.
Oh, she was like a young Sissy Spacek. She had a
Sort
nice
of a
little
plus.
lithe body on her. That's probably why Sinatra didn't want her to do it. But
I never found Mia Farrow sexy.
It's one of the few times too. It's one of the first times, I should say, that old people come off completely frightening. Ruth Gordon are so goddamn sinister and scary with their just that they use that comforting old people thing, but you know that they're warlocks and witches and the whole thing with Tannis fruit.
Oh God, yeah! Look what happened to Rosemary's Baby. Yikes!
I know, and really, the most overt thing that they do in the film is also scary when they keep saying when she's thinking about the dream and staring into the face of the demon, and you just see the eyes. That's very, very subtle.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea that you know something is happening, but you're not completely sure what's happening. I like the idea just like there's that whole sense of dread, like something bad is going to happen, but you have no idea really until.
Or the idea that she could be going crazy or losing her mind.
They did a really good job with the paranoia too. I love that's the reason the movie works so well, is her paranoia. You know, being afraid that everyone's out there, everyone that she talks to, you're afraid is going to do something.
Isn't
better.
it funny they haven't remade it?
It's a damn good movie.
Well, I hate to tell you, it's been ripped off so many times, it has been remade.
Astronaut's Wife.
And we might want to give kudos to William Castle for stepping aside to let Roman Polanski direct it, because William Castle was originally supposed to direct the film. Then he, actually after that, he kind of stepped down and became a producer only, but he did direct a few films like Shanks with Marcel, which is actually kind of scary for different reasons. But anyway, Eric, what about you? You have one?
My favorite horror film, I mean, I'm a big horror movie fan, and it's just like, I'm like going through my mind, what should I talk about, what should I talk about? Shining, definitely Rosemary's Baby, so I'm going to pick sort of a wild card one here. The original, The Wicker Man. Not the remake. The original Wicker Man, I love this film. It's one of the most unusual horror films ever made. It's the sunniest horror film.
I was going to say the happiest
horror film you'll ever see, and thereby the most disturbing horror film you'll ever see. I cannot urge anyone who hasn't seen this film enough to go out, rent it now, and just enjoy it. It's got a great cast of British actors. Edward Woodward, who was the Equalizer, stars in it. And I just love this film. In fact, I just got back from England on vacation, and I shit you not, I stayed in a small English village, which could have been Somers Isle, easily. I was expecting my own idyllic vacation be cut short by a visit to the Wicker Man.
A great performance by Christopher Lee.
Great performance by Christopher Lee. It's actually kind of a musical, which is really odd, and it's just great. It's just awesome, and has a great wind-up to it. They really set you up for the ending. The screenplay was written by a guy named Peter Shaffer, who wrote the original Sleuth. Was it Anthony Shaffer? Peter Shaffer wrote Equus. Anthony Shaffer wrote The Wicker Man.
And Paul Shaffer is with David Letterman.
That's right.
And the late night
Yeah,
players.
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
awesome.
That's great. So that's all I gotta say about see this movie. It's great.
Also,
and probably some of
a lot of naked chicks,
and
Druidic sacrifices.
And the last 10 minutes are completely disturbing.
Completely disturbing.
And this is your chance to see Christopher Lee in a dress, singing, no less.
And if you gotta see the remake, see it after you see this one, because it's good for a laugh.
It is good for a laugh. And also we want to mention, too, the producers of the film were very stupid, or the studio who released it, because the original negative, the uncut version of the film, is under a landfill. However, they were able to piece it together with an old video master.
But I'm going to be honest with you, I prefer the original cut. I mean, the cut that was released.
You prefer the theatrical?
Yeah, I think the original director's cut is too on the nose. It's too, it gives you way too much information.
You really think so?
I think so. There's way too much stuff about Edward Woodward's character at the beginning. I think we know just all we need to know in a recent cut. I think there's like weird stuff that involves Christopher Lee. It's just there's stuff there that just didn't need to be in the film that they cut out.
And there's actually a scene that's actually in that version that's not in the director's cut, actually. One scene. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head. So either way, see both versions. You can't miss. And there's a great documentary on the making of the film. And like he said, see it before you see the awful remake. All right, well, I'm going to choose one, and it's actually one of my favorite horror films. I mean, the reason I can't really pick my favorite horror film, but I will say this is the movie that actually scares me, as you mentioned, the movie, and I know Mike's going to agree with me, I think it's a very underrated film, and in fact, I think it's the most underrated film of this director's filmography, and that's Prince of Darkness by John Carpenter. Thank you. See, you'll never see that on our show usually, but Prince of Darkness, I think, is John Carpenter's most underrated and perhaps his second best film behind The Thing. We can all agree. We all think. I think I'm speaking for all of us. The Thing is one of his best films, if not his best.
No, I don't think it's his best film.
Well, what would be his best?
Halloween. I think The Thing is much better.
The Thing. Halloween's great.
Escape from New York is much better. I like Prince of Darkness.
Wait a second.
Up to
Escape from New York much better than The Thing. I mean,
no.
Wait. Oh, Prince of Darkness. I'm sorry.
I think Prince of Darkness is good up to a point. I admire Prince of Darkness more than I really, really like it. It's fun. I enjoy watching it. It's a good time. I don't think it's really scary.
Oh, hell yes. When that woman is rotting in the bed and she wakes up, scares the shit out of me.
I don't know. I just think that it's like John Carpenter loves doing these endings, and it happens a lot in his later films where it's like, oh, it was all a nightmare. No, it's really not, kind of thing. And it's become so cliche.
I don't know about that. I don't know. The whole thing wasn't perceived as a nightmare at the ending. It was more perceived as, can this guy trust mirrors anymore? Because he's sitting there thinking, is this going to be a doorway? The only weakness of the film, I think, of Prince of Darkness, and I think it's a very...
I know what you're going to say.
The leads aren't
the
great.
Leads are kind of...
What's his name? Yes, Jameson Parker. But I think there's some really good ideas. I give him big props for what is basically one big homage to one of my favorite film and television writers, Nigel Neal.
The Quatermass series.
The Quatermass series, and amongst other things.
And it was written by Martin Quatermass, a.k.a. John Carpenter.
That's right.
What was funny is I actually asked John Carpenter at a
we were there together.
Little Nerd Boy conference up at Walter Reed, and I said that I thought the Prince of Darkness was probably one of the most underrated horror films I've ever seen. And what was his inspiration behind that? I thought he was going to bring up Nigel Neal and Quatermass, but the first thing he brought up was he was doing press for Big Trouble in Little China, and he was in a bookstore and just decided to waste time and picked up a book on quantum physics and just started reading through it, and that's how he came up with the idea. I mean,
there's a lot of stuff in there I love, though.
Don't you love the messages from the future and the dreams?
The dreams.
Brilliant.
That is one of the most complex ideas to put into a horror film of all things. I mean,
no, there's a lot of great ideas in there. I think that unfortunately, it was such an ambitious idea that you could tell it was done on a limited budget, and that the budget didn't support the idea, so to speak.
They did a pretty good job.
But I give him props for trying to do it and trying to pull it off.
$3 million.
I don't agree with you. I don't think it's his best film. But
I don't think it's his best film. I think The Thing is his best film, but I think Prince of Darkness
it's probably
is
one of my. It's in my top four. My top four fluctuates, but I will say this: there's some scary ass images in there. When the guy dies, they have his animated corpse is basically filled with bugs, and it's talking to them. I think that's awesome. That's fantastic.
And just slowly kind of disintegrates.
Yeah.
With that notorious voice, he has that like the robotic voice.
Yeah, pray for death, and then the image at the end where basically the Antichrist is reaching inside the mirror and pulling the devil's arm out through the.
Well, I remember the scene where what's his name, the Asian actor who was in Big Trouble in Little China, the younger guy,
he's done.
The one that's stuck in the closet, and he just has that perfect.
Oh, he's great. He is a great actor.
Let's not forget the cameo too, Alice Cooper, and most importantly, I think the most underrated element of the movie is the score, one of John Carpenter's best musical scores.
Great score.
And that is, of course, the second in his Apocalypse trilogy, which is first is The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and then concluded with In the Mouth of Madness.
I like to talk about a film that one of those films that when I was a kid I saw for the first time and just freaked the shit out of me. And it may not be a good film,
right?
But for some reason, there's stuff that resonated. There's this film called Ruby.
Curtis Harrington.
It starred Piper Laurie, who sort of had, she was like a very popular actress in the 1950s and then kind of got a new shot in celebrity by playing Sissy Spacek's crazy mother in Carrie. And so she got to be in this horror film where she's this aging gangsters mall that runs this like drive-in movie theater, and it's haunted. And it was just, there's some like just really freaky stuff in it. Like,
you forget the thing too, why she's being haunted. All the people that work for the drive-in were actually ex-gangsters, and they're using it as like a place. And of course, the soul of the gangster is jealous that she's alive and he's dead, and so they kill all the people off in mysterious ways. There's an unusual death with a Coke vending machine.
Yeah, I remember a scene where they go up to get a Coke, and then there's a dead body in a Coke machine.
With the blood coming out.
Yeah, blood coming out. And I just remember that.
Have you seen it recently?
Crap out of me. I haven't seen it recently, but there's like little things that stand out for me.
Another film which I recently saw for the first time that I really enjoyed, that was a horror film, was Scarecrows. And I think
I gotta see.
Good movie.
Which I think really worked because going into it, I had no idea what it was about. Just going by the title, I just guessed it was about killer scarecrows, which it is about, but
don't reveal too much, Hecubus.
Look who's talking. But it starts off with a hijacked plane and a robbery, and they arrive on this farmland, and slowly but surely they each die. There's a little more to it than that, but what I liked about it was that it gave me a sense of dread, because even though it's dated since it's the 80s, I actually, in certain scenes, I actually got scared because I didn't know what the hell was going on half the time. And when you see some of these actual scarecrows, it's like, it was, for the time, the special effects makeup was done very well.
That's the unrated DVD, by the way. It was snuck out, which I'm very happy about. Very tense atmosphere, and Mike, I don't think you're going to like it because you always tell me how you always want explanation. If you're looking for a movie with an explanation,
you're not
forget
like
it.
Sometimes I do. It depends. It really depends.
There is no explanation.
Sometimes I do.
They come there, and they're alive, and that's that. No explanation, no hints, nothing.
All right, Mr. Explanation. What's give us
I think that's a good choice, by the way. I've been a fan of that film for like 20 years since I rented as a kid. I'm glad it came out. Good DVD, go check it out. Well, a film I'm going to mention, it kind of is a sci-fi horror film, and I think it's a great movie. In fact, I saw it on my birthday about 10 years ago. It was a movie called Cube by Vincenzo Natali, who I think is actually one of the most underrated directors working today.
I wouldn't even consider that a horror film.
Oh, I think so. It has elements of Kafka, but also horror, because don't forget, at the end they're trying to escape from a guy who went nuts. I think it's a film that's
great film though.
It's influenced by the Twilight Zone, especially a Twilight Zone episode. I can't think of the actual title, but it's a scene where these people wake up. There's like a man dressed as a soldier, and they're in a room and they can't get out.
It's a toy box.
A toy box, yeah. And then, of course, there's a big shock ending. This one has elements of Kafka, the very famous story. But this film is people wake up and they're in a room. They don't know how they got there. Maybe there's a UFO. There's no explanation, very vague. And they're trying to get out, but when they go into a room, there's all these elaborate traps that can kill them, so they have to be very careful. And of course, when they go through these rooms, you find out a lot about these people's characters and where they were from and maybe a reason for why they're there. I like it's very vague. Brilliant use on a low budget where there's one set, but it's lit differently for every, it's used over and over again, but it's lit differently, and I think it's great.
You know what I find? I find that a lot of scary movies that I saw or remembered as a kid actually hold up rather well today when I see them. Maybe the effects aren't great. Maybe some of the plot holes are a little bit bigger than we're used to. But if you compare like cheesy horror films from the 70s with cheesy horror films from the 90s, I think there's no comparison. I really don't. Or cheesy horror films now.
Well, I agree. I think like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre is still 1,000 times better than any remakes or any current torture porn or anything like that.
You know what was a great film that I really enjoyed that you just don't see these days is The Legacy. I thought The Legacy was great.
Legacy's a lot of fun.
It's a fun movie.
It's a very fun horror film.
I wouldn't call it a great horror film, but it's fun.
Right.
I mean, it's actually got a decent performance by Roger Daltrey. Charles Gray's in it. He's fantastic.
Sam Elliott. The man.
Yep, Sam Elliott, the man, exactly.
The most masculine man there is.
The Marlboro Man. And then Karen
Ross.
Catherine
Ross.
Catherine Ross. Who at the time, probably for like 10 years, was
Charles
the most
Gray.
beautiful woman in, I mentioned
Oh, you
Charles
said?
Gray.
Sorry.
Blofeld and
Sleeping.
Blofeld from
Rocky
Dinosaur.
Horror. But what do you guys think of The Legacy?
I'm not too big a fan of it. I think it's kind of cheesy. Actually, it reminds me a lot of a film called The Sentinel, which I think.
Sentinel's fantastic.
And it's got one of the best
Fantastic
cast I've
film.
ever seen in a movie. Everyone, even the bit players are famous. Like Christopher Walken is in it, and he has like a 10-second,
Chris
walk-on.
Sarandon was the lead.
Chris Sarandon's the lead, and you have
Chris
Queen
Sarandon.
Rain.
Which reminds me of another horror film, which is a lot of fun from the 80s.
Fright Night?
Night.
Excellent film.
Really fun movie.
Who wrote that? Because
That was
some
Tom
of the best
Holland.
writing.
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland, who actually went on to do Child's Play, and he also went on to do.
God.
And you know what? And Psycho
Awful.
2 wasn't bad. That was his film.
Yes,
too.
it was.
Oh, no, that wasn't his film.
He wrote it.
He wrote it, and that was Richard Franklin directed
Yes. Rich Franklin just died recently, too.
Fright Night was fantastic. I love that film.
Fright Night. And
That's a film you buy, and it's got the very famous lesbian Amanda Burse.
And don't forget, as my friends call it, gay night, because all the actors are gay now, almost. Roddy McDowall,
Well,
and then
Charlie,
Stephen
Charlie-
Jeffries, of course, is a gay porno actor.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, he was just at a convention.
Well, Charlie wasn't gay, the lead.
No, but it's funny. I love the movie. It's one of my favorites. But Tom Holland, very underrated director. He went on to do Child's Play, which I think the first one, which is actually a very good movie.
I thought they all sucked.
And he also, we'll agree to disagree on that one. And he also wrote The Beast Within, which is actually, I think, a very good underrated horror film.
Strange movie.
Very weird, very H.P. Lovecraft.
So.
Here, I'll throw out another movie. See what you guys think. Tales from the Crypt, Demon Night.
I saw that in
I saw that in the theater with Dick Miller, no less. I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think
Not a bad film.
It's
I think
it's
it was
okay.
bad.
I'm not a big
It's
Ernest
not gonna be
Dickerson fan.
memorable.
I thought it was a piece of crap before I saw it, and I thought, it's not that bad.
How about this? Let's stick with the original Tales from the Crypt, the 70s version with Ralph Richardson, which we were just talking
It's okay.
about.
I have to see it again. It's not my. We were talking about Amicus films earlier before we started doing this, and my favorite Tales from the Crypt is okay. I prefer another Amicus anthology film called Asylum, which I think is fucking awesome.
And don't forget who wrote it.
And it's Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho, and it's clever as hell. It's
Best
got a
linking story.
best linking story to an anthology movie ever.
I got horror films, and Hammer horror film is The Devil Writes Out.
Thank you.
Which was supposed to be remade for the longest time with Joe Dante, no less, with Christopher Lee again.
Christopher Lee is in it. He battles Charles Gray, who is essentially a Aleister Crowley clone.
It's also a very classy film in a lot of ways. Like, it's just their attention to detail. I mean, usually Hammer's famous for setting all their films in the 1800s because they had access to the costumes. But this is a Hammer film that's actually set in the 1920s, and they have the cars and the look and the flappers, the whole thing. It's a lot of fun.
A lot of fun, very serious, and here's another nerd moment. I have him. I actually met Christopher Lee and brought this movie up to him.
We're out of time. Well,
and he chuckled.
Well, anyway,
he might have not known what the hell I was
we will
talking
see
about
you
either.
next week.